thrilled to have some great innovators and digital transformation leaders from the Houston market. More Fortune 500s headquartered in Houston than any other metro except New York, and quite a burgeoning innovation scene, which has been led by the ION, formerly Station Houston. We're going to bring John on here, and we're briefly going to talk about the ION, and we're going to bring the rest of the panelists in and have an innovation discussion around what's happening in Houston and what's happening at their companies. But we're going to get John off his mute here, and I'm thrilled to have you here. It's great to be partnering with you. We've had a long relationship with Station Houston and now the ION. And what I just wanted to talk to you briefly before we jump in with all the panelists is just to give us a quick background on the ION and what it is. Looks like you have a rendering of the building that's going to be opening soon behind you. I would assume that's what that is. And I look forward to coming down to Houston when we all can travel and seeing it and doing an event there. But tell us about the ION, and then tell us a little bit about Houston and what's going on.
Well, thank you, Drew, and I really appreciate you putting this together and offering the opportunity to talk about all the exciting things going on in Houston. So my name is Jan Odegaard. I'm the interim executive director at the ION, and in short, the ION will anchor the innovation district in the Midtown Houston, which was groundbreaking and urban mixed use space. You know, it's really connecting the downtown business district with what is the Texas Medical Center, the parks, the museums, the universities, and really sort of creating an innovation corridor here in Houston. And you know, we're super excited where it is. It is also exciting from the point of view that this actually is taking an old building, sitting in the space, used to be a department store built in the 30s, and truly reimagining what that could do in terms of innovation and being, you know, it was innovative in 1930s when it was built. It was the first department store of its kind, and now it's going to be innovation for Houston as we pivot and move forward, you know, and leverage all the capability of Houston. So super excited about what that is doing for us. It is also a movement that we see across the country and actually across the globe of sort of activating the urban cores of all cities and metropolises, where there is a desire now for talent to really have a holistic view of what they want to do, and lifestyle is key to that, and sort of live, work, and play, and sort of not necessarily spend significant time in a lot of traffic is a core part of that. Affordable living is of course key, but how do you blend those things and create those opportunities for the talent that we are producing here and for the talent and startups that we want to attract to Houston? And I'm super excited about what is going on and what we are doing in terms of activating that and working with the startups and entrepreneurs, working with corporate innovators, working with the academics. There's 10 universities part of our academic network, and then also working with the communities around us, because we are in the urban core. That means we have neighbors and we have colleagues and friends that actually are, both positively impacted and there for all of that. So we're really excited about that, and this is what's exciting me.
And we're going to talk to a few members of your innovation community in just a second. But tell us, give us a lay of the land of the Houston sort of innovation ecosystem and who you're bringing together there. I mean, you're bringing together obviously corporations, but how is the academic community involved in educational institutions and other groups, whether it's government, but who's all part of that innovation ecosystem and who's going to be running around that beautiful space next spring, hopefully?
Well, so it is, as I said, there, I look at our ecosystem and said, it's easy to say, let's create an ecosystem. And so what does that sort of factor into? And the way I look at the ecosystem is that for us, it has really 4 stakeholder partner communities. It is the startups and entrepreneurs that both are homegrown and created out of our community and supported through that, as well as the one that actually chose to relocate here. That's one of it. And that's sort of like one often think about as the first thing that an ecosystem is, but there's so much more than that, because corporations have large innovation, labs within them. How do we bring those into coalitions with the startups and entrepreneurs, both as a mechanism of create those coalitions, create opportunities for pilots for the startups and engagement? So how do we create a vibrant sort of culture and engagement around that? And Houston has one of the largest concentrations of headquarters of major corporations. How do we leverage that and bring that into the fray, if you will, and in collaboration with that? Then we
please go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah,
please.
And so that's important part of that. And sometimes innovation in corporation needs to happen outside your own firewalls. How do you actually remove barriers for innovation where it doesn't have to confine and necessarily to all the standards of the corporate culture, but happen somewhere else? So that's another piece. The third piece is our academic networks. How do we work with academics to help accelerate intellectual property, basic research, applied research, that can come out and be startups? How do we bring that and support the universities in that? And also there is where you come to the talent pipeline. How do you engage with the talent? How do you communicate the tech opportunities that exist here in Houston because of the innovation ecosystem? And that is often a missed opportunity. How do you retain talent in the ecosystem where they grew up, where they studied, so that they see the opportunity to have that holistic view? And so all of these together then with all the upskilling and reskilling and digital skilling, which some of our panel members is certainly well vested in, because they know that their talent pipeline needs to be deep and broad. So that's what I look at as the ecosystem. And that doesn't mean you're coming from a university culture. You may actually not have been in a university, but you still need to have an opportunity in this sort of ecosystem.
And I always ask all of typically the panelists from corporations or other institutions, how do you measure success and ROI? And not so much ROI, but how do you measure success? From your perspective, if looking out 2-3 years down the line, and hopefully the building is full and we're post-COVID, and how are you going to define success for the ION? Is it a combination of all those things that you talked about, that there's great partnerships with academia, that there's startups being incubated at the corporate, but do you have some key metrics that are going to define your success in terms of starting this sort of what I'll call a nucleus of innovation in Houston?
I'm glad you asked. I mean, it's easy to be sort of overly focused on any one metric, and I think it is a combination, and sometimes you actually don't quite know what it is. Question is, are you creating sort of a process that are sufficiently agile to adopt to the changes that you see as you move forward? Clearly ROI could be sort of, a dollar measure, but it could also be the number of startups, the number of entrepreneurs, the percentage of people that the corporate say, we're retaining more people in Houston because of what we're doing here. So there's a fairly broad set of things we're looking at. And do I have a clean list of KPIs that I'm looking at? No, it's sort of trying to sort of figure out what that is, because, we're somewhat doing something that hasn't been done before, and yet it has been done, but every place is different. So trying to look at Chicago or Atlanta and say, well, we're going to do that. But by the time you copy something, they're actually far ahead of you. So you need to actually invent it in the community you are. And so that's key for us, and looking at that. Have to have KPIs, they will have to evolve, and you have to be brutal about it.
Right, absolutely. Well, before we bring the panelists in, and Kendall, we can get everybody's video on here. I'd also just like to acknowledge Gabby Rowe, who led the charge at Station Houston, which has become the ION. I established a relationship with Gabby quite a while ago, and we've been talking about Station Houston in Houston for a little while. So I just wanted to acknowledge Gabby, who I know has moved on. And welcome everybody. I think we've got everybody here on video. RAAMEL coming in just a second here. But we're going to go through some brief introductions, very brief, so we can get into the meat of the discussion here. And there's RAAMEL, all right. And I'm just going to go in order of how you all appear to me on my video window. So Elizabeth, you are up first. A brief introduction, sort of name, rank, serial number, and then we'll move on.
Sure. So I'm Elizabeth McGee with Intel, and I work with our Smart Cities Transportation and Internet of Things group, and also manage our outreach and engagement across the state of Texas.
Great. Barbara.
So I'm Barbara Berger. I'm glad to be here. Within Chevron, I'm the Vice President of Innovation and the President of Chevron Technology Ventures. And in Houston, I'm the Chair of Houston Exponential.
Wonderful. RAAMEL.
Hi, RAAMEL Mitchell. I'm the Director for Corporate Citizenship and Market Development with Microsoft, based in Dallas. Manage our practice for citizenship for the Central U.S.
Great, excellent. Thanks to all of you for joining. I know you're very busy. There's a lot going on. Let's jump right in. And before we wanted to get to the real meat of sort of what's happening in Houston, we did want to talk a little bit about the last 6, 7, 8 months and COVID. And I just wanted to get each of your thoughts a little bit on how you've managed and led to the crisis, but also in the context, I suppose, of how have you managed the innovation process, through this sort of challenging time and not being able to be together in person? and doing all of this remotely. Barbara, I'm sort of looking at your screen, so I'll just start with you, and give me your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so thanks for that. So, you know, at a company level, we've got kind of two things happening. One, every day we have to supply energy. So there's a whole bunch of people that have to deal with the physical aspect of the world. And then there's those of us that are in some respects fortunate enough to be able to do our work virtually. I would say a couple of things in both in how we approach innovation and then how the innovation community, Houston and beyond has done. I mean, we all went virtual pretty quickly, and we, you know, assessed the impact and all of that stuff pretty quickly. And then we kind of had to evolve our processes to doing things virtually. I would say that some of it works just fine. The technology helps. We know each other and everything. There's a couple of things that we're still working on how to get better at. One is the chance connections and the new connections. And they're very scheduled and everything now, where they used to be much more chance. So we've got to work on that. And the other piece, and maybe my fellow panelists can help, I'm a whiteboarder. And so, you know, I miss that. And I haven't quite found the tech tool that helps me with that.
Right.
But we actually get together in small groups, places and stuff because of that need for that, you know, sort of whiteboarding kind of concept.
Great. Rommel, I'll ask the same question.
Yeah, and you know, it's been one of the challenges, I think, for all of us, and I think Barbara hit the nail on the head here. We actually started at a company level out of Redmond. Our offices are just outside of Seattle, where we're headquartered in. So when COVID first came upon the U.S., if you will, Seattle area was one of the first areas to really kind of take the hit, if you will. And so we've really been leveraging, like many of our other panelists today and companies and those that are watching here, we've been leveraging these technologies that we're using, predominantly Teams and other type of technologies, so that we've been driving this forward. Fortunately, I think that we've been driving this notion of either a hybrid workplace or working remotely or working wherever, empowering our employees and our customers for quite some time. And so that's kind of built into the DNA. But the piece that we found really challenging is going back to this notion of how do we create something new in terms of teams? How do we ensure that we are at the right level in terms of our dialogues and those random interactions and connections, if you will? That's been the most, I think, challenging for us, for myself, you know, meeting new people as we're growing the company, as we're building and developing, and we continue to work every day as well. How do we make that balance? This past summer, we did something that we've never done before, and that is we hosted a virtual 1-week hackathon. It's an internal company hackathon. And so we've been doing this for quite some time, where we've had think weeks and 1 weeks and hackathons or what have you. But this was the first time that we actually came together as a company. We had thousands of employees to participate. But that in and of itself taught us a number of invaluable lessons. One of which is that in this type of environment, virtual collaboration is key. How you collaborate, how often you communicate. Over communication is probably better than where we were prior to COVID. But it also brings to, when we think about externally, it does bring this awareness deeply that there are communities and organizations that don't have the benefit of having that same type of interaction and virtual, right? Where our employees, our vendors can do that. The last piece here is that Barbara mentioned the whiteboarding piece. I am so there with you. I am a whiteboarder all day, every day, Barbara. I have a Surface Hub in my office here at home. And let me tell you that has changed my world. So my world view has changed because of this Surface Hub. But it's those type of virtual collaboration tools that are becoming even more impactful now than ever.
So Rommel, you might have Microsoft help me out with that tool that I see.
I might know a person.
I'm with you all on the whiteboarding too, and having my sitting around with Red Bulls and whiteboarding. Elizabeth, to you as well, and how's it been, at Intel in terms of particularly your job in the smart cities and IoT group and engaging with the startup and innovation ecosystems? What's kind of worked for you during this time?
Well, I think with everyone, COVID sort of created this pause, and people got really heads down on the running of the business, and there was a little slowdown on the innovation front, but not in certain areas. So, for instance, with Intel, we created a pandemic response technology initiative, which was a $60 million commitment to work with innovators across the globe that were on the front lines trying to combat this pandemic. So the innovation muscle was certainly flexed as we got super creative, working with traditional partners like our OEMs and software vendors, but also non-traditional partners, like working directly with hospitals or working with manufacturers as they retrofitted their production lines to make ventilators, and even investing in maker competitions with the United Nations. So there was a flurry of activity and innovation prompted by this passion to come together to address COVID. So that was really exciting. As it relates to smart cities, the benefit of a situation like this is that there became funding sources available to cities and states to create safe spaces. So now we have the opportunity to work with cities on, computer vision projects that help to identify if people are wearing PPE or if there's an issue with crowding. So that's been really nice. But I did want to say something on the cultural side, and that is, I think, we've all gotten used to this concept of having to trust each other in new ways, right? We can't just go and meet in person anymore. So I think all of us having this shared experience of trying to juggle life and family and mental health and gives us an opportunity to be sort of more real and authentic with each other, even not having to be as professional, right? Like we all showed up professionally today, but on any given day, you might see your colleagues a little bit more casual and a little bit more real. And so I'm hoping that this sort of sets a new tone for being less rigid and more creative and authentic with each other.
I think that's right. And John, in terms of winding up this question with you, running a place, an organization that really is designed to bring people together physically, and hopefully maybe a year from now, we're all there. But what's worked? And so you're the glue between the startups and the innovators and the corporates and all your partners. What's been working during COVID to keep everybody together, and what do you think might stick even when we all are able to get back together at your beautiful new facility?
Yeah, this is interesting, and all the things that have been said really resonates. And when we ourselves, the team ION, went into, well, let me back up a little bit. The vision for the ION was truly to create urban density, and of course that was out the window on basically March 15th. Because density was the last thing we wanted. I think density is still critically important, and it will return because we will get past this pandemic, and there will be another pandemic, and we'll deal with that. So there's going to be a lot of lessons learned during this that's going to stick with us. I firmly believe that the technology and the culture we're adopting now will stick with us, and there's going to be a blended solution. There's going to be physical event, there's going to be a virtual event, and that's going to exist largely because of the technology that companies like Microsoft and Intel is helping us provide. And we're really looking at that. So there's some real wins here long term, partially because the crisis was long enough. If the crisis had been very short, we wouldn't have had that opportunity to pivot. So that's one thing. And just to look at my own team, I joined the team in January. I was there for 2.5 months, and we went into shutdown. I just had enough time to get to know my team. So I was fairly comfortable going virtual. We shut down all programming overnight. We relaunched virtually in 1 week. And we have gone strong since. I'm really proud of that. it also shows the sort of human resiliency and ability to adopt and truly sort of get behind an effort that you believe in. And I think I'm hearing that between the lines from the panelists here is like, we discovered things about our colleagues and partners that we didn't know was there.
Right.
And part of that was truly, it's like, so, you know, maybe this is anecdotal, and I would love to hear from the 3 other panelists. You know, I always felt like when somebody came and asked, you know, so can I work from home next week or 2 weeks? There was a level of skepticism because if I don't see you, I don't know if you're doing the work, you know. So there was a sort of some comfort of you being in the office. I think overnight we suddenly had to trust people doing their job, even though I didn't see them every day. The other piece of that is that if pre-pandemic I had said, you can work from home, but at 9 a.m. every morning, we're going to have a telecon, 15-minute check-in. They would say, didn't you trust me? Well, suddenly at the pandemic, that was, nobody questioned that. I saw certainly with my team and other teams that nobody questioned that, became part of the culture. So I think that's a cultural change we've seen happening. And I'd love to hear from the other panelists whether that also happened within their corporation, the cultural change in work from home. And we see corporation announcing 50% from home, moving on.
Anybody jump in?
Yeah. Barbara, I mean, RAAMEL.
Yeah, I'm going to jump right in here. And I mean, I think it's pretty widely known. We have made this announcement about Microsoft employees working from home as a significant shift in here. And so when you said pre-pandemic that there was a bit of skepticism, you're absolutely right. I think what we found, and I would love to hear from the other panelists on this as well, but what we've actually found, maybe this is a personal anecdote, but that work, if you were working 40 hours a week, there might be a sense that you might be working about 50 hours. The amount of productivity has increased dramatically, which could be a really good thing, but it's one of those things culturally that we need to think about from a corporate standpoint. How do we balance that, right? So there's no work-life balance, just like work, and how do we balance? And so for some of us that were already pre-pandemic, having to figure that out, I think now coming out and going through this, that we're also trying to figure it out. The other point that you raised, Jan, which is also really, really relevant, is that there have been a number of studies that have come out over the last couple of weeks and months here, one of which, or a number of which kind of cite the fact that I know Microsoft, we've been talking about the future of work and what it would require and what the future of work would look like and what technology would bring. The reality of it is that this pandemic has actually accelerated the pace of technology in the workplace, how we leverage it. The future of work is now the now of work, right? And in some cases, we see small and medium businesses now behind the curve and the other large corporations that are now just catching up. So that has been a significant cultural shift, a shift in business, a shift in the way in which governments have to think about policy, right? How organizations have to think about policy, and combining that with also just operational procedures that we have to think about as a company and as leaders within our business.
That's great. So I want to jump into Houston. All right. So let's talk about what's going on in Houston. And Barbara, I'm just going to start with you, but I do want this component to be sort of a really group interactive discussion. Please, if you have questions, it looks like I know who had just asked this question in the chat stream, but I'm not going to call them out. Let's just take this question really quick before we jump into Houston. What tactics have you tried for replacing the casual office chat and serendipitous collaboration that happens in an office in a virtual format? What actually works? And that is a bit of an extension of what we've been talking about. So anybody can take that.
Well, I think that the silence maybe indicates that is probably the one remaining thing that we truly don't have a good answer to. And when we went back into the office, the way we sort of almost by construction created something was actually having those regular tag ups, and sometimes using, Slack was a tool we used a lot early on, trying to create those, making easy access to platforms like Zoom and Teams and Hangout and others, like making sure those are readily available. But there's a barrier there. Truly, those serendipitous conversations don't happen because we do not have the water cooler or the coffee maker or the teapot that we somehow accidentally stumble upon each other from,
Yeah, and Barbara, I'd love your thoughts here, and I'll preface it by also saying that we've also had to pivot. I've produced 104 digital conferences in my life, and before the pandemic, they were all 100% in person with no virtual or digital, component or content whatsoever. And the hard part for us is how do you replace that conversation in the lobby or the conversation at dinner or meeting and networking people outside of sort of the sessions. But you talked about those chance connections, Barbara. Anything, any tool, any sort of procedure, any sort of thing that's been working for you to sort of recreate that? And then Roamel and Elizabeth, please jump in.
Well, I think, a lot of my management and leadership style is fundamentally based on the fact that I'm a pretty big extrovert, right? And so the coffee, I got my best information with my morning coffee. So, I think part of it is, it has to be a little bit more structured, but I've had a lot of one-on-ones. I've had small group discussions. And I would say that there's a candor in those small group discussions and the one-on-ones that I don't know whether this democratizes us or whatever, or maybe the screen allows you to kind of open up more. But, so we've had to replace them with those kinds of things. But I also, and this is a Houston thing, but I ask people that are interested in walking, we can socially distance walk on the bayou. Lovely time of year to do that. And so I can get some of that in that way. I think you have to get creative. And the last thing I would say is this has impacted everybody in different ways. And so I think we've gotten more empathetic that there's not a one size fits all. Some of my employees do not want to do anything having to do with the office or even, an outdoor restaurant. Some of them are more keen to do that. And so you kind of have to feel people out, and people have to own up to, here's what I'm comfortable with, here's what I'm not comfortable with. So we've had discussions like that where we've not had those in the past.
Barbara, one of the things I would say too, to that is that while the random interactions are limited, other than my text message, game has increased dramatically here over the last 5 months. Just our entire team, either texting, IM, everything else. That's great. But even though the random interactions have decreased, those structured small group team interactions, the individual conversations related to projects, this has opened up an entirely new way in which we connect. And the reason why I say that is that we have all been in the homes of our coworkers, managers, those that are reporting to us, like our entire teams, like they've seen us. It's something about having your kid come in and drop something on the floor, and you try not to lose composure, that everyone can relate to at a certain point in time, that we're all dealing with at the same time. And so I think even though we're all literally socially distanced on some of these teams, particularly when you're working with high performing teams, individuals that are working on these projects that are now sometimes taking longer or maybe shorter, that you do have a certain intimacy in terms of knowledge and familiarity that we didn't have before, that I think even when we do come back, those individuals that we might not have met in person, that we're going to feel as though we really know them, and that there's a different level of connection, which is going to be unique. We might not have had that if it wasn't for this.
Yeah, and so just thinking of what I can add that's unique here. We have had more social gatherings, so no, corporate agenda, just an opportunity to sort of chat casually. So that's worked. But the most interesting tool I've come across was at a TWIN, which is the World Innovation Network event. They had kind of like mystery networking. So you would say you were available, and the system would just pair you with someone, and you didn't know who it was going to be, and you had 5 minutes, and then it cut you off. And it was a really great way to network, because you didn't get to choose who it was. And I think sometimes when we're in person, we tend to gravitate to people that we know or people that look like us or whatever it is. So I thought that was just a brilliant way to meet a real diverse set of potential collaborators.
That's great. Yeah, please.
I want to add one thing, because I think there's one thing that is common across this thing. I think there's a level of responsibility on leaders here and managers to actually make sure that the people that maybe normally are not extroverts and communicating, that actually they also are heard and actually contribute. So I do think there is some responsibility in that sense of making sure you almost call them out and make sure they get engaged. They will get over it, but we have large teams and not everybody's equally comfortable in a video setting, not even in person, but then you can do it offline as you leave the meeting and get their feedback.
Indeed, indeed. And Nigel, thank you for the original question in the chat string and your follow-up comments. There was a question about if I'm a law student, and I think that's a friend of mine out there who I know is a law student. So we'll get to that when we talk about some subjects and issues, because they're interesting areas for burgeoning law students, and where should they focus. And then Peter Mullen, thank you for your comments as well, and maybe we'll get into places like the ION, taking the place of the WeWorks of the world. But let's talk Houston. Okay, so what's going on there? Jan, why don't we just start with you to paint the picture of who are your partners there outside? What are the industries that are there? We know oil and gas and energy are there, but maybe people don't really know the other types of corporations that are headquartered there. What's the startup scene like? What types of startups are coming out of there? Paint us a picture of that Houston innovation scene there, and who's all part of it.
Well, I mean, I think that what makes this particular time in Houston sort of, being a really exciting place to be right now is to some degree being true to the DNA of Houston. Truly saying, okay, what is Houston good at? Energy, absolutely. We're known as the global energy capital of the world. We will be known as Energy 2.0 moving forward. That's a key thing. And I think that you have to start where you're strong. We have the world's largest medical center, right down the street. Just for the people that are attending here, about 10 million patient interactions per year, 190,000 surgery per year, 225,000 babies born, per year. It's the 8th largest business district in the U.S. with 50 million square foot of space. This is an incredible complex with amount of doctors and patients and data. Imagine all the data that could, this is an incredible asset to Houston. We have the aerospace and NASA Johnson Space Center. We have that. We're the 4th largest city. This is the kind of place that truly knows how to do, big infrastructure project, scale those projects, and truly make a difference. And what I'm proud of is to look at all the startup development organization and the ION to say, we're not going to pretend we're something else. We're going to build from there, and then we're going to create those opportunities. Houston knows it has to sort of evolve and change, and that's what we're doing together here. And I'm really sort of proud of that. And I think that is sort of the true sort of differentiated to how ION, I think, will be different than many of the other places. We're not trying to be something that Houston isn't today.
Yeah, and Elizabeth, in terms of look from the IoT and the smart cities and 5G, what type of interesting startups are you finding there and other partners across Houston, and why is Intel involved in the ION in Houston?
Well, we started engaging because we wanted to be a responsible member of the community, and we've stayed engaged because we see results. We see in Houston this wonderful collection of people that are really excited about trying new things and open to collaborating in public-private partnerships and having unique engagement structures. And then of course, the city has been so welcoming in terms of being open to pilot new technologies. I know Microsoft has made a huge investment into smart city solutions. We've done the same by supporting the ION Smart and Resilient Cities Accelerator. So I've just generally been impressed with Houston and their the community, the personality of the city. I will add to what or echo what Jan said. We're not trying to be something we aren't. There's that quote: "If you're your authentic self, you have no competition." And I think that's what we're embracing here. We do hard things here. We're not like virtual innovation theater. This is where you have the marriage of the exuberant and the ambitious with real business acumen and experience. And you find it here because you have people like Barbara, showing up and making investments, and innovators, and the Microsofts and other partners of ours that come in and invest. So we've loved working with the ION. We've found it very rewarding. We love working with the city. We have a couple of projects underway with computer vision and looking at some smart transportation solutions, and just had even another conversation today with one of the national labs that wants to come into Houston and invest as well in smart energy projects. So it's been wonderful, and we'll continue to show up and invest here because it works, it pays off.
That's great. And Barbara, in terms of, we know what Chevron's doing there, and we know of Chevron. I guess, I know you do more than invest at Tech Ventures there at Chevron. Maybe just give us just a brief background on what you do at Chevron Technology Ventures. And there's the investing side, and then tell us what else is going on there. And then I'd love to know, what are you looking for out of this community, out of this innovation community, out of these startups? Are you looking for solving specific problems for Chevron?
Yeah, so, in terms of Tech Ventures, and, we've been around for 21 years, good support from the top of the house. And, we're a California-based company, so I think a little bit of that was in our DNA. We want to look outside, and I think this year has only, emphasized that for all of us. The world changes, and if you don't have your eye on the outside, you miss it. And that is principally one of the risks of a large company, is losing your focus on the outside. And so that's one of the roles we play. And we've got a bunch of tools, whether it's investment, trialing. We sponsor various, I would say, innovation activities in cities. And specifically to Houston, this isn't our headquarters, but we have a large presence here, and it's the energy capital of the world. And so all of those things say Houston's really important to us, that innovation is really important, and innovation is really important in the energy transition. So we want to make Houston as strong as possible relative to innovation. So what are we looking for? I think a couple of things. So my job is to bring external innovation into Chevron, and the more the merrier. So you will never hear us say there is too much innovation in the world, right? Yep. But it's also to bring Chevron into the innovation ecosystem. And that's one of the things that places like the ION can help us with, because it's not just about my team faces out, but I need more of Chevron to face out. And places like the ION are going to be able to help us in that journey. Right. And so, obviously very excited about it. I'll say one more thing. I mean, Jan and Elizabeth are so articulate. They've told you everything, but the one piece that I think is, so what does Houston have in all of this? We have the big and the small working together and everything. We have these very strong industries that are going through change, and so innovation is required and everything. I think the diversity and inclusion in the city. And so diversity means we all look kind of different, and inclusion is we all seem to get along. And it's a welcoming city. And so I think the innovation ecosystem has to be inclusive. It won't work in Houston if it's not, and it hasn't been elsewhere, and that's been a problem. So, that's one piece of this that I think we're all committed to, and it's so important anywhere, but it's definitely important in Houston.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And RAAMEL, just quickly in terms of, what's Microsoft doing in Houston? What are you looking for in terms of partners and interesting startups, and what excites you about the community?
Yeah, so there are a number of things that excite us about the community. I mean, when we look at where we have a presence, the ability to have talent, right? A diverse set of talent around a wide variety of subject matter experts around, whether it's oil and gas or energy, more broadly speaking, or even our cloud computing or development. So when we think about talent, Houston is actually very uniquely positioned, right, in the U.S. When we think about the ports and the logistics that are happening there, when we think about smart cities across the city, the ability to bring in IoT solutions that will impact the city more broadly. When we think about the aerospace and advanced manufacturing components that are the sectors that are there, even the school district and the university systems that are represented in Houston, all align really to what we're looking at when we are thinking about community, when we're thinking about ecosystems that we can build and help support thriving businesses and thriving economies. And so Houston has that. And it's funny, you know, one of the first times I talked to Mayor Turner, one of the things that he said was that, you know, Houston's going to be known for innovation. You know, and you know, this goes to an inclusion part, because everyone in Houston has also accepted me. I'm from Dallas, but you've almost, you know, accepted me as one of your own. You probably would have if I wasn't a Dallas Cowboy fan, but we won't talk about that. But long story short, he said, you know, Houston is going to be a city known for innovation. And in my mind, I was thinking, well, this is the energy capital. Right. And so Jan laid it out a little earlier when he was talking about the Texas Medical Center. If we just looked at that, that would be attractive. If we just looked at energy, that would be attractive. If we just looked at NASA, that would be attractive. Right. And so you have all of these beautiful things that we can help to innovate, creating a collaborative ecosystem, which is very, very unique in the world. Right. Whether we go to Silicon Valley, there's a certain mindset. If we go to Cambridge, there's a certain mindset, if you will. Even in Chicago or Dallas or what have you. But Houston has done a really good job of tying this notion of innovation, leveraging the best of what we have, getting people around the table. I think about the work of GHP and even the work that Jan is doing with the ION. All of that is about setting and establishing a framework for companies and individuals and organizations and communities to communicate and collaborate and innovate effectively. And that's really key. That's what we look for.
Yeah, and as a lifelong Niner fan, I'll let the Dallas Cowboy comment go. But I actually, I grew up next to the sister of Dan Pastorini. So I grew up loving the Houston Oilers too, and love the Blues. So
all right,
Houston is also near and dear to my heart in that way. Jan, I know you had a comment.
Yeah, you know, I really appreciate, you know, Barbara bringing up the importance of diversity and inclusion, and also RAAMEL adding to that, because I'm so proud of the partners that have joined us in terms of supporting what we're doing, because that always comes almost first. You know, upskilling, digital skilling, creating opportunity in a broad way is truly what the opportunity is in Houston. That's why Div Inc. said we need to partner with ION and be in Houston, because that's where the demographic is for the kinds of people we need to support. And that is important. And if you ever have an opportunity to read Stephen Kleinberg's recent book, to talk the history of sort of, you know, his 38 years of surveying Houston, I would absolutely recommend it, because Houston today is what the rest of America will look like 20 years from now in terms of its demographic. If we can solve the problem of inclusion in Houston, then we have created a way to solve that for our nation, and we have to. We can't leave anybody behind. We have to figure out how to do that. That's a mixed approach, and I'm really proud of the companies that are here, because they are voting with their feet and they're supporting that. Not just accelerator, they're supporting workforce development, digital upskilling, reskilling, and all that. And that is so important, because we need all participants on deck helping to grow moving forward.
Jan,
Yeah, please. Yep.
Not true. You know, what Jan is saying in terms of the D&I, and Barbara's brought this up again, but, you know, one of the other, I mean, it is a key component. And even when we can't think about the future of work, like we talked about a little earlier, we can't think about the Houston becoming number 3 in terms of size and economic prowess, unless we start thinking about ensuring that every community has a level of skill set to match the work that's going to be required in the future, right? And so when we think about the talent pipeline in Houston, continuing to develop that talent pipeline is key for corporate innovation. It's key for startup innovation. It's the lifeblood of any community. So working, whether it's at a K-12 level, ensuring that there's support around kind of the Intels and the Chevrons and the Microsofts of the world, and the city itself coming together, thinking about that is key. Thinking about those workers that, because of energy transition, what's happening in that space, and sustainability efforts and resiliency and those type of initiatives that are moving forward, we have to ensure that every Houstonian is prepared for today and tomorrow and has the skill. And so one of the things that's also critical is we have these conversations around innovation and the role that our organizations play. We do absolutely have to think about upskilling. We have to think about accelerating skills, accelerating economic recovery, and accelerating diversity and inclusion efforts through that lens.
I agree. And one thing that I think is interesting, I'm going to go back to my friend John's question on the legal side, is, you know, we did this in Atlanta, and I've talked to the folks in Atlanta quite a bit, as well as Silicon Valley and other places where there's, you know, deep innovation ecosystems. And one thing I really haven't heard is sort of the role of the law, and whether it's going to be in cyber or ethical AI or all sorts of things. And, you know, if I was a law student, I think there's a lot of interesting, you know, places to explore in these innovation ecosystems, because there's going to be a lot of sort of legal implications either way. I just wanted to make a comment about that. Before we go, we've got about 5 minutes. I did want to get a little bit into the nitty-gritty of sort of innovation, managing innovation, and particularly as it relates to with the mothership. And Barbara, I'll start with you, and then again open it up. You know, you talked about traditional R&D, and obviously there's a lot of investment that goes into traditional R&D at Chevron, whether it's around exploration or liquefaction, or I don't want to get out of my depth here. I'm sure there's a lot of other areas. But, you know, talk to me about, you know, you're managing the external open innovation effort as well as the ventures group. And what are your best practices, and then for everybody here, in terms of marrying that external, you know, open innovation efforts with the internal traditional R&D, and that it's all working together? Because we know sometimes some internal R&D folks can be a little bit, you know, not wanting to go to the outside, although that attitude is changing, I'm noticing. But what are your best practices, Barbara, in that regard?
Well, I'll tell you I'll tell you some of them, but not all of them. But so here's the thing, and this is really where I put my innovation hat on. The winners are going to figure out that it's not either or, it's a whole bunch of ands. And it depends on which technology problem you're trying to solve. Where is the best capability? What's the maturity of that technology? And I think the companies will be successful when they can blend that together. And that's, in fact, the job that I have beyond ventures, is to think about in key areas is how do you set the strategy, and then, you know, leverage your internal resources where it really makes sense. Partner with startups, your incumbent suppliers who better be evolving their businesses because the world's changing.
Right.
The national labs, the universities and stuff. And I think companies that can manage all of them, and not manage them as separate, but also think about where they intersect. That's what we're.
And the million dollar question there, Barbara, and you may want to share it, and it could just be the ongoing question, is how do you bridge all that? How do you tie that all together? Maybe in a tactical way. Is it, hey, it's best to find out what traditional R&D, what a problem they're trying to solve, and let's find one thing and do a hack around it or a competition. But is there one thing that has worked really well to bridge those two, you know, external and internal R&D organizations together?
So there's a lot of things. I'll give you two. One is the whole concept of the reverse pitch or the hackathon. Put the problems out there and see what you come up with. And the second is, okay, I'm a middle child in a big family. Hire people that want to collaborate with others, and teach people how to best collaborate, both inside the walls and outside the walls, because that's the world we're living in.
Yeah, that's great. And anybody else, please jump in on that broader question of bridging those gaps.
Yeah, I can't add anything, you know, meaningful, because it's so spot on. I think the middle child one I can really relate to.
I think it is. I mean, if there's kind of like a string theory of innovation here, it really is rooted in this notion of collaboration. We mentioned a little earlier in terms of when you're thinking about communication and collaboration really being the lifeblood. And what that means also, just to kind of expand that just a tad, is that internally within an organization, we have to think about how our various business groups, even within an organization, collaborate within each other. You know, when we think about a Microsoft or an Intel or a very large organization, if you will, we have our product groups, we have our engineering groups, we have our marketing teams, we have our sales force, we have all these different groups that are coming out. And so we from an internal standpoint have to think about how do we bridge these gaps internally, and that internal innovation component is critical for at the enterprise level. The other piece that's really important is kind of breaking down somewhat of the innovator's dilemma to a certain degree, but breaking down what we've been really successful at, right? It's really easy to kind of rest on our laurels, right, in terms of some of the previous innovation that's taken place. I was on yesterday, 2 days ago, with Charles Simoni. He's the inventor for Excel, one of the early folks, Excel and Word. And one of the things that, you know, we talked about was this notion of innovation and this notion of creativity, right? And so when we think about that, how do organizations large break down what they've done to continually refine and then connect externally, and seeing that idea that a student maybe that's had, how do you see that idea? How do you bring that into the organization without a preconceived notion that your product, service, good, or what have you, that you've been producing for all these years, that's been so successful, couldn't be displaced by this? And so it does require a mindset change, a mindset shift, oftentimes, but it's all rooted in this notion of how do we collaborate internally, making that internal collaboration externally across the community.
And I would say you call it a mindset shift, but I would say it's a cultural shift too, to get like democratizing innovation across your organization, getting it out of the ivory tower and onto the streets, because we all come with our diverse perspectives and backgrounds. And if we're all given license to be creative and innovative, you know, that's when you get the really breakthrough ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Indeed. Well, look, as we said in our prep call, we probably weren't going to have time to get to all these hot topics, but I'm going to do a quick round robin, 1 or 2 word answers only in regards to the technology. We're not going to have a deep dive in any of these emerging tech, but what's the one emerging tech that is on your radar for 2021? Elizabeth, we'll just start with you because you're right here in my window.
Sure, I would say 5G. Just, you know, it's like getting rid of the bicycle and getting in your Ferrari. The opportunities that it opens up is just really inspiring, and we're really excited to be heavily invested in this space.
RAAMEL, and you can't say cloud, RAAMEL.
I can't say the obvious one for us.
No, you can't say cloud.
I would use 2 though.
Okay.
AI and also blockchain would be 2 that I would think about.
That's great. And Barbara, also same question, but I'm going to say don't say green tech, because we all know we want Chevron to be working on green tech, and I'm sure it is. So not green tech, but what's a technology on your radar for 2021?
Hydrogen and fusion.
Thank you. Very interesting.
That's in both of them. Yeah.
Hydrogen and fusion. Might have to do a CDX deep dive roundtable on that. Jan, you have to be a bit democratic here, Jan, but what maybe just more personally for you, what's on your radar for next year in terms of?
No, I mean, clearly, you know, front and center on my mind is getting into the building and welcoming everybody that was on the panel, as well as the panelists, to join us in the building in Q1. But I do think that, and I do agree with all the areas we have, and I think data science, AI, blockchain, hydrogen, absolutely. These are all key things that we're looking at. I think battery technology, honestly, because there's so much of our life that is revolving around that. The automobile, we need better battery technology, and we need to have environmentally friendly battery technology. So there's sort of like a really big challenge here for the material scientists, connecting with the sort of the high tech area of sort of IT that truly is going to be transformative when we make it there.
That's great, and mine is security. All the conversations we've been having, totally different, verticals, .com, .gov, .org, everybody, security, concerns around security. So, hey, look, we could go another hour, but we can't go another hour. So a big thank you to all of you. I know you've all been very busy, and we really appreciate you taking the time and doing the prep call. And this has been a great conversation. Jan, thanks again for helping us organize, and to Kaylin and to Taylor out there who helped as well. We will keep everybody out there up to date on future CDX and Techonomy roundtables and events. And I wish everybody a very happy Thanksgiving and holiday season. And I look forward to staying in touch with all of you. And we look forward to coming to Houston as soon as it is safe and possible. We will be there to do an event. So I look forward to meeting you all in person sometime soon. So thanks again, everyone.